States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda for today, December 5th?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Okay, and then do we also have an approval for the minutes from November 21st?
Motion to approve the minutes from November 21st.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're good. Unanimous. Okay, school committee chairperson comments. I don't have any comments tonight, so I'm a late fill-in chairperson, but why don't we move on to community comments? All right, anybody here? Anybody online, Sam?
I see no hands raised.
All right, excellent. We can move right along to student comments. I think first we've got Miss Pike, the Spanish immersion coordinator here with a Spanish immersion program. So you guys can come on up to the table.
Okay, thank you. Conveniently right at the bottom.
Almost down.
Okay, so thank you very much for having us here today. We thought it would be really great if we could highlight some of the really amazing things going on in the classrooms throughout the Spanish immersion program. I've had the opportunity to go into all of the classrooms and I see wonderful things happening. And you'll see evidence here with our students presenting. So we have a mixture of some student presentations, some videos of teachers have sent me, and some photos highlighting some of the activities and some of the things that go on in any given day in the Spanish immersion program. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have, she was supposed to have a friend come join her, but I don't see him. So we're going to have you come on up. And Crystalia is a kindergarten student in Senora Martinez's class, and she wants to demonstrate the Pledge of Allegiance in Spanish. El juramento a la bandera. Can you come on up? Okay. You stand right here, honey. And look at the flag. Okay, and nice and loud.
Yo prometo lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos.
Excellent.
Okay, so that was the first fun thing. And there are... I had a video just in case it didn't work out. So, and then for Senora Ibanez, so we have two kindergarten classes. Senora Ibanez sent me some videos of some of her students sharing words about autumn. So this is the first video.
En el otoño se caen las hojas, algunas amarillas, otras rojas, y los animales se preparan a guardar comida porque viene el invierno otra vez.
So basically telling about what happens during the fall. The leaves fall and animals prepare. And in this video on the right, we will have this girl is explaining different vocabulary words on a poster about autumn.
Color naranja y tiene 3 ramas. Veo 6 hojas y otoño, unas amarillas y otras rojas y otras marrones.
Muy bien.
Y veo un niño, tiene un carrito, tiene 2 ruedas y dentro del carrito es un calabaza más grande.
Muy bien, Ela.
Veo un niños, niña tiene un calabaza pequeño, veo dos girasoles de color amarillo, veo un espantapájaro que tiene un abrigo de color azul.
Muy bien, Ella.
So that just goes to show you, I mean, these are kindergartners and we're in December, so just how quickly they learn, it really is amazing. Trying to get to the next. Okay. All right, and then in first grade, Senora Moreno, this is our first grade teacher at Clough, sings a song. Her kids are singing a song about autumn. So autumn is the theme. Okay. So, and then in first grade, Senora Calvo had some activities when I went to go visit her class that they were doing notes of gratitude, and they have a big library of all kinds of different books in Spanish that the students can pick and select what they would like to read. So they were doing choice reading that day. In second grade, there is a project here that Senora Mumbiela, I thought it was a really amazing project. It's a cross-curricular project based on unicorns. So they tackle the question, do unicorns exist? And this project touches upon every subject. So, okay, so these are the students in our class. I'll just briefly go through, but they start out with the questions of where, so they talked about geography, different continents, because they said, oh, where do they exist if they exist? And through that, they study the different continents. Then they tied in math by saying, oh, how many antlers or horns do they have? And then they talked about how some have one, some have two. With that, they talked about counting by ones or twos. And then they did graphic organizers, comparing and contrasting. So they worked on those skills, a rhinoceros with a unicorn. Then they talked about, this here was when they talked about other legends from Massachusetts. And then they brought in the culture of Spain, because of Bigfoot. So they brought in the culture of Spain because Senora Mumbiela, where she's from, they have other legends there. And they're actually, this video here, they're going to send to a school in Spain to talk about unicorns, and they want to learn more about the culture and their traditions in that country.
Hola chicos y chicas del segundo colegio Joaquín de Monzón. Somos la clase de Super Españoles. También de segundo grado en Memorial Elementary School in Upton, Massachusetts. Así aprendemos. Los unicornios vivían en China como los dragones y casi son iguales a los caballos. Nosotros estamos investigando los unicornios y nosotros investigar que los unicornios son un mito o leyenda. Así que pusimos trabajar, buscamos información de distintas leyendas y historias del lugar que vivimos.
That was their project. And then moving on to third grade, Senor Dominguez was practicing writing when I went to visit, and they were focusing specifically on the Spanish accent mark and how it can change pronunciation of words. That's a skill that you need to work on. It doesn't come naturally to English speakers. Fourth grade, Senorita Herrera's class, we're doing stations to work on math skills like weights and measures, factors, multiplication, and other skills. And you can see this is our Spanish assistant. She was there helping as well. She comes from Spain as well. And then that's Senora Ana. And then fifth grade, Senorita St. John, who used to be my student. So Senorita St. John was teaching the kids about circuitos or circuits using gizmos. So it was a cool way to see that app in action. And you can do it on the smartboard, and the kids were doing individual work on their iPads as well. Spanish. And then the sixth grade, so I have my student presenters. You guys can come on up. We have Neva Lilburn, Ryan Brown, Alex Caruso, and Ian Toby, who is standing in for his brother who couldn't make it. So come on up, guys. You can stand right here. And I can just be in the background flipping the screens, but you can talk, okay? So they're going to share some of the highlights of the projects they've worked on this year. Who's going to talk first? All right. So Neva and Ana. So Ana is not here, but Neva is going to speak about a project we work on. Go ahead.
Okay. So we were learning about Pangea and Alfred Wegener. Alfred Wegener is the person who discovered continental drift many years ago. The continent was one big supercontinent. It was called Pangea. Alfred Wegener presented his ideas to different scientists, but the scientists rejected his idea. And diarios de Alfred Wegener, we wrote a diary between ourselves and Alfred Wegener shares and explaining kind of like what he went through to explain his like evidence and why he got rejected.
Okay, and then Ian.
So we were learning about like the tectonic plates and like how they like move the continents around. The different types of plates are a convergent boundary, like with like the oceanic crust and the continental crust, and then there's the convergent with continental crust and continental crust. And then there's a transform boundary, which is when the two different plates move in opposite directions. The convection currents are like a pot of boiling water. When the warm water rises to the top of the pot and cools down, then goes back down to the bottom, and then it repeats.
Awesome. And then for social studies.
We are learning about Otzi Geisman. He is a human from over 5,300 years ago. He was found dead in the mountains in 1991. There are many theories about how he died, and it's fun learning about him. The human in the picture is what people think Otzi.
We learned about the evolution of humans. We learned how we believe they started in Africa and they expanded to populate the earth. We learned about how we got smarter and how we adapted to different living environments to be able to live here right now.
In the beginning of the year, we started to learn about cultures and civilizations. We read a book that is called Westphalia. It is about a boy who starts his own culture and civilization. After reading the book, we did a project where we created our own culture and civilization. Below is an example.
So this was your project, right?
Yeah.
So you want to explain quickly?
So these are the natural resources.
And what was the geographic location?
Swiss Alps.
Swiss Alps.
These are the, like, the natural resources. We also studied like what we could do with the natural resources to make the clothes and what food we could eat with the things we're edible. We also like knew that most civilizations had tools, so we came up with ideas of what tools could be with the natural resources that we had. So these are examples. We had like categories to do, so we had to do like one thing for each category at least. So one of the things was things for your skin. So I made up pollution. And then we had another category that was
Good job. Thank you. Good job, sixth grade. And then for seventh grade, students in Senior Overdoors class, we're talking about what they are learning this year. So, this video.
Bienvenidos a nuestra entrevista de nuestra clase del español. Mi nombre es Tania y la grabadora se llama Nani. Ahora estamos en la clase del español. ¿Qué aprendiste este año de la clase de español? Aprendimos sobre los países hispanohablantes. También ahora sabemos que los países están en América del Sur, Europa, África y Norteamérica. Ya sabemos que hay 21 países donde el español es idioma principal.
También aprendimos sobre los capitales de los países hispanohablantes.
Muy bien. Gracias. Ahora estamos en el segundo grupo. ¿Qué aprendiste este año? Hemos aprendido mucho vocabulario sobre identidad, comida y la comida de la acción. Gracias. Finalmente el tercer grupo. ¿Qué aprendiste este año? Hemos aprendido mucho gramática como ser y estar, adjetivos y los verbos en el presente. Muy bien, gracias por tu tiempo.
And then last but not least, we have eighth grade. So come on up, we have Drew French and Kaylin Flynn, who are going to present about 10 reasons that it's a good idea to learn Spanish.
Hello, my name is Kaylin Flynn, and this is
French.
We are students in the Spanish Immersion Program. Today we will be showcasing a project we did earlier this year, helping us learn reasons to learn Spanish.
Hola, somos estudiantes del programa de inmersión. Hoy vamos a mostrar un proyecto que hicimos este año que nos ayudó a nosotros a aprender las razones de aprender el español. El español es el segundo lenguaje más usado en el mundo. Es importante porque si vas a un país español, puedes entender todo y no estarás abrumado. Si la mayoría del mundo habla español, puedes viajar a más lugares donde puedes hablar el mismo idioma. Cuando viajes a otros países, puedes encontrar algo que te encanta o algo que quieres hacer. También puedes aprender sobre culturas hispanas de otros países hispanohablantes. This basically is saying that Spanish is the second most spoken language in the world. It's important to learn Spanish because you can travel to other Hispanic countries to understand their language and culture. Learning Spanish allows you to travel to more countries that you can feel comfortable instead of having no clue what's going on.
Hace unos años alojé a mi casa de una de las estudiantes de intercambio de español. Somos amigos ahora y hablamos mucho, y puedes conocer personas nuevas. This means that you can meet new people. I had 2 exchange students live with me in my house, and I got to know them very well. And I still get to talk with them to this day.
Puedes tomar clases de español en la universidad, el cual te ayudará a encontrar empleo. Tomando clases de español te ayudará a encontrar un trabajo que te pueda dar más dinero. Esto puede ayudarte a comprar tu propia casa y suplir tus necesidades. Si eres alguien que le gustan los negocios, puedes comunicarte con otros negocios hispanohablantes y generar más dinero. This explains the fact that you can take Spanish classes to find your job. Taking Spanish classes in college or high school can help you set up your future career.
Es bueno para el cerebro. La ciencia dice que las personas bilingües y multilingües tienen mejor habilidades de pensamiento. Esto se debe a los niveles más altos de función cerebral cognitivo que se produce al cambiar de un idioma a otro. This means that learning multiple languages has been proven to help the brain and help its thinking.
Puedes ayudar a otros que solo hablan el español. Algunas personas no entienden sus trabajos porque solo hablan inglés en la compañía. Si trabajas con estas personas, puedes explicarles en español. Si hay alguien que está trabajando en algo y está confundido, puedes ayudarle con su trabajo. Por ejemplo, si alguien está trabajando con su negocio, puedes explicarle su trabajo en español si necesita ayuda. This states that you can help people that only speak Spanish. Some people may find that they don't understand their job because they only speak that one language. Because of this, if you work with someone like I just explained, you can help them understand the job. For example, if someone is working on their business and they receive something that they don't understand, you can help them explain it in Spanish.
Tienen buena música. La música en español es muy buena y si aprendes el español puedes escuchar música en dos idiomas. Shakira es un buen artista de España. Ella es tan popular que es popular en los Estados Unidos también. This means that learning a new language also means you can learn new music. Listening to Spanish music is a great way to learn Spanish, and Spanish music sounds really nice.
Puedes aprender sobre culturas hispanas con libros y películas en español. Los libros y películas hablan mucho sobre la cultura hispana. Esto consiste en celebraciones, ropa, comida, festivales y prácticas religiosas. El español tiene muchas películas y libros que puedes leer y entender. Con esto puedes aprender sobre toda la cultura hispana como las celebraciones. This states that learning Spanish provides you with the opportunity to learn the Hispanic cultures with books and movies. The Spanish language has many books and movies that you can understand. The Hispanic culture has a lot of celebrations, food, clothes, and festivals. El idioma del español te ayuda a aprender otros lenguajes. Si hablas español, la estructura de otros idiomas latinos va a ser más fácil para aprender. Por eso puedes hablar más de un idioma. El idioma español es parte de todos los idiomas latinos. Este consiste de portugués, francés, italiano, rumano, catalán y gallego. Por eso es más fácil aprender otros idiomas latinos. Learning Spanish actually helps you learn other languages as well. The Spanish language is a part of all Latin languages. These languages all have a similar structure, meaning it's easier to learn and understand.
Ayuda al cerebro con recuerdos. Cuando más usas tu cerebro para aprender nuevas habilidades, más funcionarían las funciones de tu cerebro. Aprender un nuevo idioma empuja a tu cerebro a familiarizar con nuevas reglas de gramática y vocabulario. Tiene primero entrar en memoria para reconocer nuevas palabras. This means that learning multiple languages can improve your brain and your memory.
El español puede ayudarte a ingresar a la universidad para encontrar algo que te guste hacer. Muchas universidades miran si eres bilingüe o no. Por eso, si tomas clases de inmersión en español, te ayudará a ingresar a más universidades. Puedes ir a la universidad y tomar clases de español y para encontrar un trabajo que te guste. Por ejemplo, puedes tomar clases de español y puedes ser maestro en un lugar como aquí, donde hablamos el inglés. Por eso el español puede ayudarte a encontrar un empleo que te guste. This means that learning Spanish can help you get into colleges. If you complete the Spanish immersion program and get a high enough score on your test, you can earn your seal of bilingual, which is shown on your college resume, which colleges will. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Excelente.
Our friend João is here. I think we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance and el juramento a la bandera one more time, okay?
Ready? And nice and loud, kids.
Yo prometo lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you guys. All right, you got a tough act to follow.
Always do.
Want to give us an update on the student representative?
Yep. So I have a couple of updates. My first update is that Nipmuc has a winter wellness week this week, and this happens during the school time. It is used to spread awareness of wellness practices, promote healthy lifestyle, and learn ways to cope with and decrease stress. Activities are like hot tea being served during breaks. That's what we had today. We also have a mindful minute at the beginning of some of our classes. So that could be like the teacher showing us like a minute-long video of breathing in, breathing out, or just like, staying off our computers and phones for a while. And then we also have a speaker tomorrow that's going to talk about ending the stigma of mental health and reaching out for help. And then my second update is the Drama Guild. Senior Drama Guild students are producing one-act plays. This is at December 9th at 7 p.m. Tickets are $10, and the shows are judged, prized, and awarded. So we'd like to see you there.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, that's good. So I think we move on to superintendent and administrative comments.
Yeah, and we're going to begin with Mr. Harding. Joe is right behind me. Going to come forward. We're going to put him here at the front of all my comments for the field trip request form, so he can go back to his students. So welcome.
Hello. Thanks for taking the time and considering my proposal. The Mendon-Upton Music Department normally does big trips. And we do them every 2 and 4 years, depending on the cycle of the students. Part of this is coming out of the part of the COVID scenario. We had a group of seniors who were only able to travel with us once. Granted, I took them to Disney, and it was fun. But kids, they're always looking to have a complete education, and part of that was the idea to say, well, maybe we can do a little quick day trip. Give those students, a good sending off for making it through a really tough couple of years in their education. And so the proposal was, let's try and do a quick trip, and New York City came up as one of those destinations that the students would really appreciate. There's a lot of culture down there, and they're old enough now where with supervision, by chaperones, but we can allow them to kind of explore, that kind of an area on their own. So the plan is to get up ridiculously early and head down there, do a quick stop in Connecticut for some food, and then drop off at the bottom of Central Park. And we'll divide them up into groups, kind of based on what their interests are. And then those chaperones will guide them to those locations. Do about 2 or 3 hours, again, depending on the bus company and what they can give me. Do a couple hours there around that area, Times Square, and depending on how far they want to walk, again, that will be based on the groups that they sign up for. Do some exploring of that part of New York City, then we'll all hop on a bus and go and see a show. The only show is available at that time on a Friday is Blue Man Group, but it's a fun show. It's a great show. It's got some good musical elements to it, along with just some fun-natured humor. So we'll see Blue Man Group, and then we'll hop back on the bus and travel south and do the financial district. Again, just some more exploring for those students as they're on the older side, just guided tour and kind of things based on what they sign up for. And then hop back on the bus, World War I tour, and shoot all the way back here at a reasonable hour. Only thing that's up in the air right now is the bus company. They're shorthanded, so they haven't decided whether they can do, if I do the longer time, they need a relief driver. So we're still working out some details as far as that's concerned, but my goal is to keep it between $150 and $200 per student. That is what the students said would be reasonable for a day trip of that nature, and something that's doable. Obviously, the boosters are always available to help, students who might need some support on that. Because again, it's going to be for seniors and maybe some juniors if we have to fill out some seats. We're looking about to take 50 students, and probably 5 to 6 chaperones. Questions?
That sounds great. Sounds great.
If I have empty seats, I'll let you know.
No jazz? No jazz?
No jazz, no. Unfortunately, we're gonna try and hit some Subway, see if we can see some in the environment jazz as we go. Again, it depends. We're gonna continue to work out some of the details. Once we get it approved, I can kind of reach out to students a little bit in more detail. Everything's been hypothetical so far. So once we get approval, we can dive into the students. And if there are groups who are interested in traveling a little further and exploring some of those, either Lincoln Center and doing a tour of that, that time period that we build them does allow for some flexibility. And taking older students allows us some flexibility with them as well as saying, okay, we'll meet back here, in this general area, or be able to travel together. So there's a lot of pluses. This is hopefully going to be a guinea pig for us. It's one of those things where perhaps if it goes really well, it's something that we will continue to do in between the travel years. Again, just to give those kids, because they work hard all year, it's a fun way to kind of get those seniors a nice sending off, as we go. And whether it's New York City or something else close by, this will be our little test to see what we can do.
Sounds good. All right, can we do a motion to approve the field trip as requested?
I move that we approve the field trip.
Second. All right, all in favor? Aye, unanimous? Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We'll keep you posted, and we'll get pictures and updates as we go and things like that.
Sounds great.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
So I'm going to move on to some district updates and events that are coming up.
So much better, thank you. I love that. A few things coming up, and we kind of shared some of the events of Thea talked about the Wellness Week coming up, et cetera. But on tomorrow night, we have our SI Advisory Board meeting. We have that 4 times a year. And so we'll be doing some of the highlights in our programming. And Megan, as you can see, is doing an excellent job entering into the role. I wish you could be here for me to hear me say that, but I'll say it to her again tomorrow. But she's doing a great job and just a ton of coordination. We have a lot of new ideas about ways to communicate out differently about SI programming too, just to make sure it's aware, but people are aware of it. We had a parent-to-parent information night last Thursday. We had about 24 participants, mostly pre-K parents who might be interested in the program. So that was great because that's not our official kindergarten enrollment information night, but just parents that heard about it, because we have a great team of parents working along with us and partnering to get information out. So we're moving forward and have a lot of people involved. And at that meeting, see, I'm going on and on about my events here, but at that meeting, we have subcommittee groups that work on different projects in planning for the year. Wednesday, we have a course concert. So I listed out, we have MISCO 7th and 8th grade course, Nipmuc concert course, Nipmuc vocal ensemble, Nipmuc a cappella, not to be missed. It's always incredible. So I recommend checking that out. It's always great every year. On this Friday, we have December 9th, we have an early release day for students. And I know this is new, some of the release days throughout the year, as we increased it over the last couple of years to provide more ongoing professional learning. And our PD committee and Cheryl, who's been leading that, has done an excellent job in planning out some ongoing PD for our teachers. So I just wanted to pull up just to give you a sense, but you can go to our PD site and just check it out. But a few things that we have offering. We have integrating SEL and academics in middle and high school classrooms, fostering self-management skills in academic classes. We have a session on how ADHD impacts learning and students' emotions. We have action research to promote civic engagement. We have Foundations for Inclusive Practice, using panorama data. So you can see a little trend here tonight to consider adjustments to Tier 1 instruction. That was a lot of high school. Middle school project-based learning. We have that we're working with about 20 or so of our teachers who have a sustained support visit from the school leadership network that we're involved in. And we're also working on differentiating instruction with tools and techniques. And in elementary school, we have a Project Lead the Way at Launch training. And I know Dave here has done a lot of work with that. We have some learning walks to support literacy instruction where we had some of our teachers are going to do observations in other districts for a portion of that day as well. And also there's a session on applying the new Massachusetts World Language Frameworks to our curriculum. And there's more if you want to go to the website, but that just gives you the range. So when we talk about what we're focusing on, you'll start to see some of the themes aligned to our district strategic work that we've been doing. And then back to a couple more events, make sure everybody knows about it. We also have a 7th and 8th grade concert. I saw that on the calendar for the 14th as well, and band concert for Nipmuc. And I'm sure there's more. We have the one-act plays you already mentioned, and I'm sure I missed a few, but those are a few highlights. Any questions on that portion before I move on? No? Okay. So and I know you'll talk about the budget subcommittee later on as well with an update, but something that came up was talking about capital planning. And in our strategic plan, we said about this time, November into December, we would start to form a capital planning, like ad hoc committee for the school committee. So I wanted to put that on under my comments so we could talk about that. Basically what you would need to do is have a discussion, if we could talk about how many members you think you might want to have from school committee on that committee, and other representatives. Maybe you could have a town official from each town that might be on that committee. And then what I want to make sure we do, we have members here from MUCP to make sure that once we have it set up, that we're also partnering with them as well, because we'll be talking planning for fields as well as building facilities as we start this process. And we'll also have members internally, in the department. Obviously, we want Ken to be part of that, who knows the most about the facilities, Jay, myself, and a few of us as well will be part of that. But kind of wanted to open it up to us now to see if anyone might be interested in that or what process you might want to take for moving forward.
Anybody got thoughts or jump in? Or?
Anybody want to raise hands for interest?
Well, I guess, because between different trainings, other things, is there best practices that, I haven't done any research on this,
Right.
to be very honest.
No, that's
but
okay. And I just wanted to bring it up. We don't have to have all the answers
sure,
tonight.
But is it
thoughts.
usually, 3 administrators, 3 school committee, 3 town representatives, or like, what have you seen in the past on these
Do you
type
have
of?
the history of it, Jay, in the past ever?
Well, so we've never had a capital planning committee at the school district level. Most towns have them, and it's just been members appointed by the select board. I mean, my suggestion is that you have, Ken and myself and Maureen, probably, if it's gonna be a subcommittee, you need to have 3 people from the school committee. I would probably have at least 1 representative from each town, maybe from their finance committee or select boards, whatever they decide. And then a couple of community members. You don't want to have such an overwhelmingly large committee that you can't get anything accomplished. But you want to have a committee that represents kind of all the stakeholders. So obviously the taxpayers are a big stakeholder in this.
What did we have for the superintendent selection committee? Was it 3 school committee members or was it 4?
I think there's
3. It was Phil and Carrie and myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you can use as an example the building committees you had for the schools when they were done. So like the Clough Memorial Project is the last big project we did as a district. Those committees, they were probably about 8 people, some community people, a couple of school committee people, the members of the district that actually had a role. At that time, I was on the school committee, so I was in that role.
Yeah. And the end goal of that would be to essentially build a capital plan.
Yes.
Across all the different phases that we're talking about here, all the different proposed ideas.
Right, so, we've got a contract with Aviv and Associates that's gonna start to analyze all the buildings, assess their, various conditions, put together a fairly comprehensive report. Then it would be the committee's task to take that report and put it into action to see what the next steps are as far as getting some of these things done.
So my recommendation is if you want to start with any nominations tonight or anyone who might be interested, if people are interested now. Otherwise, if you didn't want to do it now, you could always just email me and then I could, communicate out if we were able to get 3. But I think it makes sense to talk about who might be interested in it. And even if you're not officially the member on it, doesn't mean you can't go to a meeting as well. And, we can always post, et cetera. But for it to be a working committee, it makes sense, to have 3. And then just if you determine, okay, it sounds like one official from each town, we could reach out to once we establish the committee here. So I would say you'd have a motion to establish it. And then we could reach out to the towns to see who might want to be interested in being a formal member on it. And then it would be likely, Jay, myself, and Ken, and Emily internally.
Sure.
Do we have any idea of the time commitment, how often this Zoom meeting, for how long? Established
3 times a week for 7 years.
Well, it could be something that you renew every year, just like our other committees. So it's not for life that you are on a committee, although we try to keep some people on because you learn it over a year. But as new members come on and come and go, and so it would be, I would imagine that we'd try to meet monthly. If we had enough to meet on, we obviously want to get established, and I would say, 1-hour meetings to start, and it might not be monthly if we don't have enough to meet on first, but we do have a preliminary list, so we could start going through that. And then I'd also like to have the MUCP group be able to present to that subcommittee, and then later on come and present later on in the year, maybe when we do our facilities budget presentation later on in the year, so
But this
they
is a
can see the work
potential-
that they've done as well.
This has a potential for going on for 3 years, right? Right?
Yeah, I mean, usually you have the committee in place, like I know in my previous district, granted it, wasn't regional, but there was a capital planning committee for the town. School representatives had a subcommittee that worked on it and contributed and worked with the town officials. So it's just a little different. We're driving our own. We're asking for members to participate with ours because we need to be able to, partner and collaborate with members from both towns as well, once we get to the point of trying to advocate for different greater needs.
Yep.
So I think just being able to establish it and get started, because the second bullet I'll get to is strategic planning, and the strategic planning, that's a lot of time. So this, I think, is just, let's set it up and see what we need to do. And once we have the report, that's when it might take a little bit longer later on in the year. We would have a longer meeting and we could, hear the presentation.
Well, I like the idea of having 3 school committee members, of the 3 administration, and then try to get at least 2 members of the 1 member of each community involved as well. I'm not sure how much time we have, but I imagine there'd be a finance committee person. We're trying to involve them.
Or select board, either or.
Either one. Yeah. So that's what I think. If everybody's willing, I think we should put that in as a motion, just to show the membership, so we can at least begin somewhere, show where we can move forward. So
is the motion to create a MUSRD capital planning committee?
yes.
Okay.
So as I just explained, so moved.
So moved. All right.
So membership included.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So we've created a MURSD capital planning committee. Okay.
So now we have to think of membership over the next, probably, how long do you want to take to do that?
I think it might be a good time if anyone's interested, they could say right now, hey, I might be interested in that. I think it's good to talk about that, to see who's interested. But certainly I know Phil's not here tonight too, so because everyone's not here, then I can follow up with a memo and people can put in, but it's good to hear, I think, from one another. I kind of like that. I would love that.
Well, I've been sort of backing off from all of it. So I guess I would volunteer.
I would be interested too.
Yeah, I mean, especially given your sales campaign on strategic planning, I'm definitely interested.
Well, wait a minute. So let's just think about it. Enough opportunities for everybody. So I'll do a follow-up and then we could try to set up a meeting and look at the list and kind of plan out the year.
Sure.
Like a planning.
We need like a week to do some horse trading between ourselves. I think.
This is where the big action is strategic planning. So that's my next bullet here. Just
one
yes,
more
please.
comment on capital
Sure.
planning, right? I mean,
Yep.
I think that everything we made sense, or we said made sense, right? 3 school committee members, 3 administrators, at least, representative from each town. But I think, this almost could spur off other subcommittees within itself, right? Depending on where the capital planning goes and where we start to gauge interest from the town. Is it a middle school? Is it, right? Because I think capital planning is eventually going to come down to bare minimums, next level of upgrades, and then kind of big bang or something like that, as we then work through what each of those would look like. I don't know if that made any sense or not.
That did make sense.
That's sort of how the lead report, I think, is supposed to be structured, where it's like the bare minimum you need to keep your school. It's going to have tiers of recommendations.
Right. Yeah, and I think that'll be, maybe I missaid it, but that'll be all within kind of what I almost call the first layer, right? But then we think about, fields, athletics, and stuff like that. I don't know if that's gonna come out of their report or not, but that could be separate. And there's the bigger question about, is there a school capital planning committee that eventually comes out of this?
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
It seems like this is a stepping stone into having a more formal capital planning committee that can meet on a continual basis throughout the year.
Yeah.
With a permanent subcommittee.
Right. But I think, and maybe the last, so I know we haven't gotten to the budget committee yet, but like one of the things that came out of the last budget committee, and Jay, I think you shared some of this, it might just be your historic knowledge, but you mentioned, there's a plot of land here, there's a plot of land there, we almost need to make sure somehow we get that representation at the meetings. I don't know if there's, select board or FinCom, like who knows all that kind of stuff, right? Whether you're thinking schools or you're thinking fields and that kind of stuff.
And I think now that we have it established, then we can set our calendar, and then that's when we invite people to come in and present all of that information, make those connections, which will help better inform what we have internally. And so there's work that we could start now and not wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Sorry to cut you
No,
off there.
not at all. That's great.
But that's a good point, because I find myself, I don't know what all the assets are that are assigned in school.
Right.
Right, and what can be utilized for different projects that we know are gonna come down the road within like a 10-year time frame.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
All right, so my big intro here, so the next topic is strategic planning. So we're in our 5th year. I know you all know this, but everyone at home, we're in our 5th year of our strategic plan. So we're going to begin the process of developing a new 5-year plan. And that work will officially begin in January. So I kind of want to put it on everyone's radar of what will be coming out for information. And I wanted to start here at the school committee meeting. So I'll start the process of communicating to the school community about this process and what it will entail. So one thing people can expect is that we're going to begin with a strategic planning initial feedback survey that has some targeted questions related to visioning, related to strategic plan. I'm definitely going to pull some of the questions we had 5 years ago. We had a pretty good survey that got us started that we can look at. And in the process, there's a lot of data we'll look at, a lot of the entry planning findings and other surveys. When you have the superintendent survey, there's lots of different aspects of what we can bring in as we start our work. Something else that will be scheduled are focus groups and sessions on visioning and feedback. And so last time we had at each of the buildings with teachers and staff. We had students at each of the buildings. We had opportunities for community members. We had parent members. So there will be lots of feedback sessions. I think originally at the beginning of the year, before I knew we were going to be doing the really fun district comprehensive review that cut into our a little bit of this planning time, we thought we'd be starting this probably in December, but then had to kind of put some things on hold. So I'm going to get the information out. I don't know if we'll be able to pull off any feedback meetings in the next couple of weeks. If there's a night that's free and not there isn't a concert on it, maybe there's a possibility, or maybe I could start with students, because then that's something I could do like during the day and access. So there's possibilities, but if it starts in December, then we'll go into January, so you'll have the feedback. Something else we'll do, and will be similar to last time, we'll put out a request with feedback. We'll also put out a request of who would be interested in being on that committee. I have to say this now, almost to what Jay's point he just said with the other committee, it won't be limited to 8 people, but we try not to go over about 25 people in the district for it to be an actual working group that's productive and but we have lots of other ways to keep getting input from people. I just want everyone to know that. So what we would do is put that out, but we really have a range. So I wanted to bring it here first. One, all school committee members are invited. So if we had all at the strategic planning consistently, we would just post and you'd be, part of it. That would be fine. I definitely would want, I think 2 is good. So there's like, if something comes up or whatever, you always have, I think at least minimally, we need 2 school committee members that'll be part of that process. And that's what we did in the past. We reach out to community members as well. We always have students because they're amazing and could probably write it better than we could. So we have student reps, and we have reps from all different schools as well. So that quickly fills up for people who are interested in being in that. But that will have the dates spread out. They're usually about 2 hours long. They're usually in the evening. So we have to check the district calendar. And when you're on the strategic planning committee, I know things come up, but it is a commitment. So it's saying we don't want people coming in and out. You need to be in most of these conversations throughout to give feedback. We don't think that we'll be starting from scratch like we did 5 years ago. We really kind of started from ground up. I would see we're probably going to be keeping some of our same things. Portrait of the learner, we'll take a look at it and see how we can bring it to life some more and do work with it. But we're not going to just revamp the whole portrait of a learner. And we didn't have one 5 years ago. And so now we'll take a look at it. We have a great mission statement. And so we'll take a look at it, but we're not likely to change, everything for our mission statement. But some of the things I would see changing are taking a look at our vision for the next 5 years, taking a look at our initiatives and our objectives that are going to drive our work in the district. And as you know, what's really important, and I always say this, it's something else, and I said it in our district review, I don't know too many districts that are so attached to their strategic plan as we are, to the degree that we are. It drives everything we do. And so this is important. This isn't a document that just goes on the shelf. This is what we live and breathe and talk about and make connections to with all the work that we do. And then when you have the budget piece coming in, look to support budgetarily when we're trying to move things forward that require funding. But we don't put everything in that requires funding. We were very careful last time to be, it wasn't just adding things in, it was like, what is the work that needs to be done, right? So we're, part of it will be looking back at where we've been and how far we've come, and then what is that road forward in some of the work we want to do. And some of it, I think we were very aspirational in this last strategic plan. And I see all of this authentic learning coming to life as a result of that. I think another piece, there's some technical, practical pieces that are kind of bubbling up, facilities or, fields or other areas. And so with that, I would imagine that's going to be part of our work too. And some programming that we wish that we could have brought in and we haven't quite expanded to the degree that people in the community have said that they want. So we can talk about that. And of course, SEL, I could keep listing off all the things. But I'm excited about the work and getting started. And so just want to make sure I share this here so people are familiar. Something else, I've been in contact with an outside provider I saw at the New England Superintendent's Conference about a month ago, and it was called Benefits-Based Accountability. I think I was talking to Sean about this. I feel like we were talking about it. We talk about accountability, and sometimes it's hard for us to figure out the ways. We always talk about how do we measure all these great things that we're doing, right? And how we identify. And so it's a different approach. He's just entering into Massachusetts. He's working all around like the US. I'm forgetting his name. I should have written it down, but he spoke about it and I just had a meeting about it. But what they can do at the beginning of strategic planning work, they can help you identify what benefits members of your community are looking for in their schools. They're looking for certain things. And so if we're able to then identify that and then figure out how we're going to measure that, deliver it, and then measure it, it's a different approach to accountability than saying, hey, let's just look at our MCAS scores, which I'm not saying we're not going to look at them, but there are other things that people in the community are looking for. And so part of that, they recommend if you're going to go this approach with benefits-based accountability, to weave that into some of your strategic planning work. I don't know if it's a fit yet. I'm gonna have another meeting with them, but I just wanted to bring it up to the whole committee. It was something we're looking at that might inform us in looking at what we do a little bit differently.
So would that be the facilitator? Is that what you?
No, that might be like a portion where they could work with us about benefits-based accountability to help us support our work in strategic. So I'll stop there, but I definitely would love to hear who might be interested in participating in strategic planning committee. I know you don't have the calendar yet, so my goal in the next week or so is to try to look out 6 months and see what I can do. It takes about 6 to 7 months to do the strategic planning work. If you're going to meet just once a month, every for 2 hours, it might be that we'd have to have a couple shorter sessions. And then what we did last time, we all met in here. Lots of activities. We had an outside facilitator last time, but then when we brought it all together, then through the summer, the leadership team finalized some of the final details for the document, and then they brought it forward and then kind of launched into that next year.
So just from the last time we had, I don't know why I'm thinking of it this way, but I didn't look at it as a big burden, to tell you the truth. Did we have them in the middle of the day? That might be a problem for some people.
No, they were
evening?
all in the evening.
Okay.
I'd have to check if we went with a 4 to 6 time slot or if we went with a 6 to 8 time slot. I'd have to check to see kind of what
It was the daytime, so that just
but it
was-
wasn't during, it wasn't school day time.
Right.
The focus groups and some of that work was. So
So
it was
for me-
evening so people could attend.
For me, I didn't think of it as a big burden, so it is worthwhile to do stuff like that, especially with what we came up with. I'm pretty proud of that, so.
Yeah, no, it's probably nothing I love more than doing some strategic planning. Actually, I love lots of things, but that's one of them. So it's exciting. So I'll reach out, and if people could let me know, and then I'll, if they're interested, and then I'll set up the schedule next week. And if people have questions about the process, just feel free to have them reach out to me, or just stay tuned. We will get information out once I find the time to get that survey out and the feedback. And so it's on my list, but wanted to bring it forward here first. All right. Thanks. Those are some big items this week. All right, Jay, come on up.
Price is right. Hi, everybody. How are you tonight?
It's good as long as the price is right.
The price is right. Actually, I'm gonna get that little Bugs Bunny thing with the counting the money. It's gonna be my new signature. All right, you have a year-to-date report in your packets tonight. Just a reminder, we're doing them a little bit different than this year in that there's a column for what they call range to date, and I'm isolating it by each month. So the most recent one is November 1 to November 30th. It also has a year-to-date. In general, we're still in really good shape. As always, this time of year, my concern are building maintenance issues. We've had a variety of issues with control systems and elevators. The elevator at Nipmuc needed to be repaired a couple of times. So those are the things that always sort of get me concerned, just because we're early in the year, and yet there's a couple of budget lines that we've already pretty much expended. So we just kind of monitor that. Obviously, if things break, we have to fix them, and we have coverage in other areas that will hopefully, get us through. On a positive note, for the first time this year, I can tell you that our snow removal budget is really in good shape. So we'll see how that goes. And other than that, I think the accounts are pretty much tracking the way I expect them to. If you look through, I'm sure you've all studied this ad hoc, ad nauseum, right? It's riveting reading. We did just get, if you happen to notice, we had no expenses so far for transportation. We just on Friday last week got bills for August, September, October, and November. So that will start to get depleted as we go through that. But other than that, the boilers at Nipmuc are up and running. We're just about ready to close that project out. But there's little mechanical things that just keep having issues. And, the systems are very complex, much more than you would expect in your house. I mean, there's pressure reducing valves that control water pressure and pressure for the water that goes through the tank. There's just a lot of little mechanical things that I am learning slowly over the years what they are, but Ken knows them all in and out and seems to always know what's wrong and what to do to fix it. So we're lucky that we have him to help us. Any questions?
So there's athletics transportation budgets are completely spent?
No, it hasn't been spent at all. We have yet to get a bill until Friday.
It's saying 100% of budget, that's all.
100% is remaining. That's what that means.
Oh, okay.
100%. So you see, for that transportation, 70,000 range to date 0, year to date 0. The balance is 70,000. We just got a bunch of bills on Friday. How they can wait until then, I don't know, but that's their business.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Anything else?
Nope. It looks good.
Me and Bugs are going to go back to the back.
All right. Thanks, Jay.
All right, so that's it that I have.
All right, sounds good. On to new business. And it's like we've got Dr. Patrick and Dr. Quinn to give us an update on social emotional learning and well-being data trends.
What? You're gonna go over there? Okay.
All right, so I can rain and my sweater won't clash.
So blend in.
I'm not sure I'm digging this right in my face, but.
You feeling okay?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
You feel like you can regulate your emotions okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, we want to attend to the needs of the whole learner, the whole administrator. What do they say on airplanes? You put your oxygen mask on first before you put on your neighbor's stuff.
Truth be told, I am a little nervous. I'm a little tired. And, I had a couple things happen to me. One meeting today, it was crazy, and I'm still thinking about it here. But I'll tell you, I feel very supported. And I feel very glad to be doing this with you today, Dave, as a colleague.
Well, the feeling is mutual.
And I'm prepared. Okay. And, I've kind of practiced thinking about how to think about these feelings. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. So shall we?
Let's go.
All right. So we're here to talk about attending to the needs of the whole learner, because that's really what it's all about. And I had a great opportunity to talk with you a few weeks ago about the academic data. And we wouldn't be talking about that academic data if it wasn't for everything else. So, you can switch it. We'll give you a little bit of a context before we kind of launch in. When we started the academic year, we had a great kickoff and were reminded about the real importance of understanding, supporting, and engaging every single student. And when we talk about that, we also are reminded of a lot of the tools and systems and practices that we use to do that. And so a part of our presentation today is about just that. One of the ones that we'll highlight that kind of got covered up in some of the graphics here is Panorama.
And Panorama is a tool that we use not only to understand our students' social emotional well-being, but also to be able to think about how to support them. And we've got other tools at our disposal to do that as well. That frames the context basically, because as we talk about strategic planning, our mission in this district is to empower all learners to thrive. So let's talk about what that means. And I'm gonna jump up because I'm calm.
Yeah.
And advance the slide. Oops, the other way.
I'm so sorry.
Because I do this. And so let's talk about how we think about how learners thrive in MURSD. We talk about it in terms of this competencies that we describe as the portrait of a learner. And these competencies are described and understood as things that students can do. And they're called I can statements when we talk about them here. And part of this, I think, is a really important introduction to what we're talking about, because you can see when you talk about the idea of, and in this case, I'm just using effective communicator, which is one of the competencies in the portrait of a learner. If we focus on that, when we think about the kind of I can statements for students, I can share ideas clearly, okay? Well, we got a chance to think about some of that and when I was presenting with the MCAS data, right? Like, how do students share ideas clearly? Well, one way is through writing, right? And speaking and things like that. And so these are the things that we measure and we think about, and we use those as gauges for how and whether students are sharing ideas clearly. But also embedded in these I can statements are adjectives and verbs that really beget thinking about more than just things that we typically measure in academics that have everything to do with both, they're both antecedents and supports for the academics, but they're also skills unto themselves that we hope all kids, all people can come to and be able to develop as they progress so that they can actually thrive. So look at the word respectfully, for example. Respectfully is a word that kind of requires that students understand other perspectives, right? That they just aren't able to like write what their opinion is, but they can see the other side. They can empathize with people. They can really understand a different perspective that will allow them to kind of think about how they're communicating, that they'll understand that audiences hear things in different ways too, and that if they want to get their point across as an effective communicator, they've got to be able to kind of read the room. They've got to be able to calm themselves. They've got to be able to learn who their allies are and who the supports are so that they can make those connections. These are all different things that like actually help kids become effective communicators that aren't just about sometimes the skills that we measure academically. Thanks, Sam. So the MTS framework that we utilize is kind of the hub and base of talking about the supports that we provide for students. It really locates, look at that, social emotional, right at the base of the framework, okay? It understands, and we talk about in this district, how it is about learning academics, yes, but also social emotional learning, and also making sure that we're supporting the entire student through the supports that we provide in classes on a daily basis to all kids, not just because some kids struggle, but because it's important that we all learn these in order to thrive. So, again, here's what we hope to do today. With that context, we hope to share a little bit about the importance of social emotional learning and attending to the needs of the whole child, and kind of how we do that on a day-to-day basis in all classrooms. We want to share a little bit about also what we've learned about student SEL through this tool that we have, that's Panorama, and some of what the tool teaches us about where our students are at in terms of their social emotional well-being. So we administered the tool early in the fall, and the results, the administration has closed. David and I have had a chance to kind of dive in and look at some of the data and do some of the comparisons that were asked for at a different meeting. And we'd like to share that with you.
Yeah, and so before we kind of do a dive in, we just kind of want to frame a couple of items. First of all, that this is a snapshot of the student experience. It was taken at a certain point in time. And I think this lens is really illustrative of that point, is that this lens is not going to capture everything. And we'll articulate what it does purport to capture. But we also know that there's more work that needs to be done, whether it be through focus groups or one-on-one conversations or working with our school counseling office to get the entire landscape within the room. So Sam, if you go to the next one. So the constructs that the Panorama survey measures kind of fall into two buckets. The first bucket is social emotional. So one construct is self-efficacy. So how well does the student feel like they have control over their educational experience and their academic outcomes. Self-management deals with their emotions within a school. So if somebody's bothering you, how often can you calm yourself down? If you're having like a challenging moment in class, how well are you able to regulate yourself? How frequently can you do it? And we'll show you some of the examples of the questions as we go along. Emotional regulation is a little bit more broad. It talks about how you do in different situations outside of school. So there's no reference to the school. It's just in general about how well the student regulates their emotions. And then growth mindset addresses how much the students feel their ability to grow in certain areas is valuable. So do you think that if you put in more, you're able to put in more effort into school? Can that change over time? Next slide. The second bucket is well-being. So that deals with your challenging feelings. So how anxious, how worried are you feeling? Positive feelings, how frequently are you feeling happy during the course of the week? And then finally, and this is an area that can just be a strength, supportive relationships. How's your relationship with your family? How's your relationship with your friends, with your teachers? And so it collects 47 questions for our students in grades 6 to 12, 41 for our students in grades 3 through 5. We did not do a K2 survey. Reason being is that is all teacher self-reported, and the teacher feedback was, we're still learning our kids right now. We didn't feel as comfortable being able to provide that data. Next slide.
So we're going to share some of the data with you, but before we share the data, we'd like to make sure that you understand some of the trickiness with understanding this data. So there are a couple of points that we want to just kind of raise up because they'll come up as we're going through the data. First thing is some variables are actually pretty hard to understand. That's part of what we do in PD too, is help people understand how these constructs are created. The 7 constructs that Dave just went through with you actually are melded together into composite variables, and they really hang together that way in terms of statistical analysis. So in many regards, they really want us just to talk about those constructs. In this particular thing, this particular piece, however, challenging feelings, which you remember the icon with the kind of grimacy face a second ago, this is an interesting one because you might think when you see a percentage next to challenging feelings, it might make you go, oh, in this case, 55% of our kids have challenging feelings. But that's not what it's saying, okay? It's actually saying, and they flip the way that they measure these things around so that they can present it. They're basically saying that the challenging feelings is measured by how favorable the responses are to the question. So when they ask you, the question during the past week, how often do you feel worried? If you answered almost never or once in a while, that's the 55%. Okay, so it's actually a good thing when you see challenging feelings in 55% over that. So that's the first one.
Second, I apologize. I don't get it.
You don't get the challenging feelings one?
No, I don't get 55%. Am I adding the 16 and 23 together?
So no. That's interesting. I think maybe we just mismatched the graphics here. Oh, you know what it is? This is one of the questions of the challenging feelings. What we're doing here is just showing you how they essentially array the answers. Okay, so there are, yeah, exactly. There are 7 questions that then they compile into the 55%. Okay, good question though.
All right.
all right?
So the other piece,
I'm not reading it.
The other piece that I think is really important is that the option for sometimes is not necessarily calculated into favorable. And so sometimes is often a reasonable response, but doesn't count as favorable. So in this particular answer, in the last 30 days, how often did you get your work done right away and didn't wait till last minute? Well, I don't know about you, but I think sometimes, not wait is a pretty reasonable response. The fact, and I think it's also key because only 59% is rated into that favorable response. I think what's also really interesting as you dive deeper into the data, only 11% of those students responded, and granted, 11 still something to work on, are engaged in behaviors that are, well, only once in a while do I get ahead of it, or I never get ahead of my schoolwork. And what's nice about Panorama is that we can drill down to the item analysis level, and counselors and teachers can work with those students with those behaviors. So just want to frame those in context as we look at some of the bigger picture. And right now we'll take as we go through this data, it's kind of the 35,000 foot view with a kind of a couple of highlights. But Sam, next slide. Sure.
All righty. So this is the other piece that we thought it was important just to highlight as we're going through this. So the way that this tool works too, it arrays all the questions, brings them into sub-composites that form the composite variable. And they also compare it to national results, okay? So in this particular case, the one on your left is supportive relationships. That's one of the pieces of social emotional learning. And you see that the results across the district are the 89% favorable response to supportive relationships. This is one we've talked about a lot in this district because that's amazing. That's like 99th percentile for across the nation for folks that are using this instrument, and that the kids here have strong supportive relationships in this district. It's truly something to celebrate. And it makes sense. 89%, you'd say, okay, yeah, you're doing well, okay? Next to it, we have emotion regulation, okay? Emotion regulation is more about how kids kind of like sit with some of the challenging feelings that they have and how they manage that. And there are a series of questions that go to that. You'll see that our percentage is 54% favorable, okay? And you might compare that to supportive relationships and be like, oh, we really have to work on that. And there is work to be done there, okay? But it's also important for you all to know that when we compare it to other schools that have used the same measure, we're actually at the 90th percentile for this piece of that variable, which I think is pretty outstanding too. Not that there's no work to be done, but it's important, I think, to just know that the percentages and the percentiles can kind of like tell their own stories. So we just want to be mindful before we launch in.
And for added context, so what is that percentile based off of? That's 3.5 million survey results. So we've got a fairly broad sample with this. We can also disaggregate it to like schools with suburban and urban districts, and then also based on the ones that have higher free and reduced lunch population or more traditional or affluent communities as well.
Do you have the breakdown for what constitutes the sample set? Like what schools, what attributes, where they're located?
So I don't have it like granular where I could give you a list. What I can do is Panorama provides us the overall number of how many surveys were completed. I think there's something like the number of schools, I think it's in the 4,000s, but I'd have to like go back and check. And then they don't allow you to
even by state or anything like that.
I can ask to see what kind of data they have, but just want to kind of give you that higher level piece of it, that it's a fairly broad grouping.
Is that all from this year, or is that?
That's longitudinally across the implementation of the survey, which I don't know what the beginning year was. I don't think it's earlier than 2015 because the company isn't that old, but I'm happy to get that information for you. All right. So kind of just taking a broad view, looking at the overall results. So in the 3 to 5 range, what you'll notice, at least in the percentile range, is that out of the 7 categories, we were in the 80th to 99th percentile out of 6 out of the 7. and self-efficacy, which we will also see in the 6 through 12 survey. It tends to be an area of focus if we had to prioritize, but generally speaking, these are all areas of strength in our elementary and then 5th grade at NISCO. So Sam, go on to the next one. So similar results in the 6 to 12, a little bit lower in terms of the 80th to 99th percentile with 4 out of the 7 categories. Challenging feelings, self-efficacy and growth mindsets are areas for growth. I think it's a little bit more common as kids go to middle and high school that more of that challenging feelings, or it gets a little bit harder, life gets a little bit more complicated. So it's not that surprising to see a little bit of a dip there. But again, this gives us a just kind of an overview of where we are and how to start to prioritize our focus.
And wait, actually, before you go, and I know you're taking the next slide, but I think it's worth pointing out too just the breakdown. So it's 3 to 5. The group breaks it down, so it's like elementary and secondary. There's obviously a big range, 6 to 12, but that's something to point out. And also, some of this stuff is very interesting. That some of the variables that suggest that we should look at them a little bit more closely and ask, how can we support kids better in these areas? They're the same in some of those areas. It looks like there was some difference for challenging feelings, but self-efficacy was similar in that regard. So I thought that was interesting.
So next we want to kind of go into glows and grows, so areas that we think have been a really good strength, something to build off, something to celebrate as part of our school community, and then some areas that we think might be more of immediate focus.
And I'm going to pop in again, and I'm going to say, and the reason why we weren't, highlighting the strong relationships, supportive relationships, is because it's so amazing, and we've talked about it a lot. So we said, we only have a little bit of time. We're going to skip right to self-management because that seems like another good one to talk about.
So from the 3 to 5 range, we were really encouraged by the students who were self-reporting that they were able to stay focused during independent work. Sometimes the younger kids, the older kids too, can be a little chatty, you can get off task, but anytime you can have, over 75% of your students able to stay focused during independent work, we thought that was a really good area for self-regulation. Also with the emotional piece, how often you were able to keep your temper in check for the grades 6 through 12, having 83% respond favorably that they frequently are almost always able to keep their temper in check. We thought that was a positive, something to build off of, and even sometimes is a pretty good response. But those were 2 areas, and it also kind of gives you an indication of some of the questions that students are responding to as well. So those are 2 of the glows for us. But there are some areas that we need to build upon as well.
Before you flip it though, I think one thing that's interesting too is if you take the sometimes in these areas and you add it, which is, we talk about this a lot too, because it feels like sometimes it really should be considered like, if you're sometimes keeping your temper in check, like that's a good start. Anyways, we want to do more of it, but it's in the 90s for all of these, which I think is pretty amazing.
And this is not to say that the next 10% are it's not getting away from that. Those are still focus areas, but that's where our counselors come in to be able to support those kids. But generally speaking,
do you have the data to break down the grades between 6 and 12? That is a pretty big range.
Yep. Yes, we can do it by middle, we can do it by grade, and then Cheryl's going to get into some of the more specific data in the longitudinals.
And there are, just so that we just wanted to pick out a cup so that you can get a texture of the instrument. So we're just presenting 2 questions here for each of these glows and grows, but there are 8 additional questions in this subcomposite, and there are, I think, 4 more for the next one, which thank you. So let's focus on self-efficacy. We're suggesting that this may be an area of growth for us, given our percentile and the percentage of favorable responses. So the 2 that we're positing here are, how sure are you that you can do the hardest work that's assigned in your class? And for what's presented here on the left is the grade 3 to 5 response, which was 46% favorable. Interestingly enough, At the 6 to 8, the percentage increases to 54%. So even though both of them we see as like an area that we want to think a little bit about, and we want to develop strategies around, it seems like as kids progress, that is improving as they get older. And this is interesting too, because it has to do with like some things like confidence, right? And kind of resilience, really, to be looking at, you know, the hardest work. So there are things that we can and do in classrooms. When we think about these ideas, we can help kids start to visualize their success, right? That's a strategy that's used in classrooms. It's like, what will my success look like when I get to the end, right? Well, I'll get a standing ovation or something like that, but a child could say, okay, you know, a success in this case is going to look like I'm going to have a bunch of friends around this, and we're going to get this project done, or what have you. Teachers can also work on their recognition, and we're going to see that that's happening. Like in the 8th grade, they have regular recognition days that are led by the kids, that they're identifying things that they feel like are worth celebrating across the way. So these are things that we talk about when we say, okay, how can we help kids really improve their stamina, for thinking about some of engaging in the hardest work. Also, on the one on the right is what complicated ideas are, when complicated ideas are presented in class, how confident are you that you can understand them? And again, we see an increase from, this is reporting out on 6 to 12 now, again, just because we wanted to represent, that's 50% favorable rate for the older kids. At the younger grade, it was a little bit less, it was 44%. Okay. So now let's get into some year-to-year comparisons, because this was something that was asked, and I wanted to make sure that we addressed it, especially now that we've administered the tool 3 times. So it really begets the question, okay, well, how are we doing over the pandemic? And as we seem to be emerging beyond it, like, how are our kids doing with these same measures that we've been using over time? So one of the things that I thought was interesting is essentially just looking at all of the subcomposites and looking at them by school. So you might ask the question, well, within a specific school, when we look at the kids, and this is MISCO, okay? When we look at the kids in MISCO, and we look at each of the subcomposites, how are we doing last year compared to this year? And so this graphic just kind of arrays all the subcomposites that you've seen, the challenging feeling, emotional regulation, positive feelings. And really the point of this slide, I feel like the main takeaway for me is that from last year to this year, every single one of those subcomposites improved, okay? Now, we don't know if that improvement, like say from 55% to 57%, is really significant. It's like really like a worth celebrating, a little bit of a move. But I thought it was worth pointing out anyways, that we do not see dips, and we only see upward trends, which I think is important. And so I thought that this was an interesting thing to show, just because we were interested in this longitudinal piece. You can flip again.
Is there any margin for error there?
Well, it is.
Familiarity with the system, for instance.
So the error comes in because you have different kids taking the instrument, right? And so in this case, you're essentially looking at kids who attended MISCO in 2021, right, writ large, and then kids who are attending this year. They're different kids. But so this would be like really about how are we doing in the building, right? How do we see trends happening in the building? The next one might be getting to kind of what you're thinking, Sean, though. This is more along the lines of a cohort comparison, okay? So what I ended up doing is I ended up pulling up this year's 5th graders, this year's 8th graders, and this year's 10th graders, just as data points, basically. And I said, well, I wonder how those kids were doing in 2021 and 21-22, and then this year, 22-23. And I created a bar for each of their composite results. And so you see longitudinally in each group that there's a tendency for an upward trend as well, okay? Again, not exactly the same kids. You'll have kids like leaving and moving in and moving out and stuff like that. So it's not mapping exactly on, but in this case, by and large, you're talking about the same students longitudinally over time, and you're seeing by and large an upward trend. And I thought that was important to point out. And so this I thought was interesting as well, because we have talked about some observations that have been done of this instrument in the past have focused on female students and how their responses to some of the social emotional metrics have been lower than the male students. And so I was kind of curious to see, well, how are we doing this year? Is that still something that we need to pay attention to? And what was interesting is that when we just looked at the 10th graders and we just pulled out those longitudinal trends again over the last 3 years, and we looked at the females and the males separately, it looks like actually the females have had like a quite an improvement, not as much of an improvement for the males, right? Like that seems pretty like standard. But one thing that I was happy about is that when you looked at the difference, and we talked about this a lot 3 years ago, where for some reason girls were reporting, much less regulation and less well-being in terms of social emotional compared to their male peers, that those differences don't seem to, this instrument seems to suggest that maybe those differences are kind of going away.
And so I am a little partial to qualitative research, so I'm also really curious about what are the actual words, what are the things that students are saying, which is kind of hard in a survey like this with the open response, because sometimes at the end of 41, 47 questions, you just kind of want to tap a couple things. Some students have more to say than others. That's, I think, why we need more focus groups to have these conversations. Did love the use of emojis in this. We pulled out 2 questions. We added some bonus slides in there for the opposite. For 3 to 5th, what's making you happiest right now? So family, obviously. So families, thank you so much for all you're doing to support your children. It's really making an impact. It was like the biggest theme here of what they make happy. Friends, video games, those are all really important. Mom, dad, home, sports. Sports is another really big, important piece of the student life. Not to be, unexpected. Teachers, Mrs. Evie was mentioned. Cats, iPad, drawing, playing Minecraft. So all those things that are bringing students to joy. And then we've also got the challenges for the 3 to 5 in the next slide. But in the 6 to 12, very similar responses in terms of what making you happy. Let's take a look at the challenges for grades 6 to 12. So a lot of it's schoolwork focused, right? So the school is a bit of a challenge for our students. Homework more so at the high school level than at the middle school. Sometimes it's a challenge with the interactions with friends. Certain subjects may be more challenging, whether it be math or geometry or AP macro for different students. Again, it's a snapshot in time. It could have been just the time where the AP macro project was done. Take AP macro myself, it's a challenging class, so that can be really hard. So college stuff. So it's all the typical things, but again, it helps us to focus. Wellness week, I think, this is a really opportune time as we have kind of those 2 ends of trying to limit the amount of take-home work, but also just a really good starting point for our students as our teachers begin to take a look and analyze that data. So I think for our next slide, just kind of, all right, so what, now what? So what's ongoing, what's already in the works, what's coming down the pike?
Yeah, and I guess I'll just say, I see the data as like really positive, and I hope you do too, right? And it's not accidental. We are working on this in this district. We think that it's very important. If you walked into any of our buildings in the first couple of weeks, you would have seen very specific focus on easing into school, helping kids make connections with their teachers, with each other, really building collaborations and things that really help not only folks feel at home and at ease and be able to move and produce in school, but also are skills in and of themselves. So, and we've got a whole long list of things that are happening daily sometimes, and then sometimes regularly with all kids. And they include things like morning meetings at the elementary school.
Expanded KCR program, which is more structured with particular lessons, like core values that are also shared home with families.
We have WIN blocks, which stands for what I need. And those blocks are blocks of time that students can are either structured or semi-structured, and they can, access the supports they need. And it can be academic and it can be social emotional.
We also have the 8th grade piloting some of the more dipstick type of assessments. So well-being Wednesdays, using the Thrively platform to do just wellness check-ins with students, trying to figure out how do we make sense of that data, trying out the resources that we have to get a better understanding of our students.
At Memorial, they've created families which is just adorable. I have to say, having seen it, it's they essentially create these small groups with students from every grade level, and they stay together and they meet monthly to do activities together. And the last one I saw was on respect, basically. So you have 4th graders helping kindergartners to figure out how to, think about respect, and they're all doing it all together. And then the idea is when the 4th graders move up to the middle school and everyone kind of shuffles along, that another kindergartner or 2 will become a part of that family, but that family will stay together.
As you've heard about quite a bit, Wellness Week, but I also think it's Wellness Week, while it's a week, there's a large focus on a continuity beyond wellness, the week itself. Also within the classroom, not just about events, is how do you continue to create the context where students feel like they can thrive in their classroom. It's also part of a larger strategy. I know you're familiar with NITMUC's kickoff to the year, which was much more focused on advisories, building community, less focused on academics, attending to those social emotional needs right off the bat. So this Wellness Week is a continuation of that. And in Common Planning Time, teachers are beginning to dive into the Thrively and Panorama data to deepen their understanding of students. Every teacher gets a detailed breakdown of every student by their class within Panorama that they can aggregate by different groups and subgroups to give them a comprehensive overview. So this is part of the work that they're doing or that's ongoing. And then we have a PD session this Friday that will help teachers navigate the platform that builds on some work that we did last year as well.
And I'll just add to the platforms, we've talked about the utility of the platform for data, but it's also really useful because it does provide interventions as well. So there's a playbook aspect, that's what they call it, to Panorama, that can help engage students in activities that can help build some of these schools. And we also have another platform called Thrively, which is a strengths-based platform that kind of asks kids to talk about the things that they like and the things they feel good about. And it helps teachers identify those strengths and utilize those strengths in a positive way.
And then I think it just to tie it all together is that there's an intentionality with STL. Are there areas for growth and improvement? Absolutely. But it's a concerted effort across all 4 buildings, with building leaderships all the way down to the classroom teachers. And we just want to say we're grateful for the efforts that the teachers are putting in.
Yeah. And I won't get into some of the titles of some of the PD because Miranda, you did a great job with that already. I didn't expect you to. But I want to say one thing about this S3 Academy, because we've talked about it a little, and I want to make sure that you know its connection to this work directly. S3 stands for Systemic Student Supports, and it's a collaboration with the Rennie Center and Boston College, DESE, and our district was fortunate enough to be accepted into this academy. It's a 3-year partnership. We're beginning it this year with every single school in this district, which is not the norm, right? And so every school decided that we were ready to create a team to actually think about how do we think about everything that helps a student thrive? Like, what are those variables and how do we look at them and assemble them in ways where every single student, we can go through and have a plan for each individual student. So this partnership we're actively working on it now. We've assembled those teams. We'll be working at a district level to think about how we actually can bring the data together. So the social emotional data and the academic data, which informs each other as staff are trying to think about how to best assist students. And we'll be with it for another 2 years. So
Every single student?
Every student.
Who's doing that? Is that as the consultant, the S3 people that we're bringing in, or is that?
It's a bit of a combination. So the idea is that what we need to do is think about the things that really help us understand kids. And then over time, that's why it's a 3-year commitment, develop these systems that will be able to do that and be able to share the data as kids move from grade to grade. So every teacher won't be starting with, their paper folders or what have you. They'll have a place to go that will share the longitudinal data. So it'll take some time. You're right. It's a lot of work. And this group helps us do it in a way, will help us do it in a way that will ease us into the work and start small.
Can you all talk about some of the spaces, particularly the middle and the high school, where some of that tier 1 work is happening? I can kind of conceptualize how it happens at the elementary school. There's a lot more flexibility to how that happens, but how is that happening at the middle and high school?
Yeah, well, one thing that we talked about is WID block. That's happening at the middle school, okay? WID block is not a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention. It's something for all kids. And they're doing that in conjunction with their teams. So the teams are looking at data, and part of the data is this social emotional data. So they're looking at the academic needs, the social emotional needs, and they're thinking about how to structure these blocks of time to provide the supports to all kids in different groups, right? So you won't necessarily be with like the kids that you were in English class with or something, like, it's based on what you need at the time.
And then at the high school, the advisory structure helps to address a whole host of challenges, including social emotional learning.
I'm kind of jumping off on that. So, like earlier you said, which specific question it was, but you're like, yeah, we'll drill down on that 11% that had a less favorable response. That the counselors and teachers will work with those students to do that. How is that implemented at the higher, the high school, middle school, where kids are, it's more fluid who their teachers are and stuff like that?
That's where our school counseling office comes into play. They have access to this data. My sense is, and I don't know for sure, but my sense is that these are the students that they're working with continually. This helps us to find kids who may be slipping through the cracks, who may be a little bit quieter, may not be displaying, the signs of additional need. But that's where that more targeted tier 3 type focus will come in.
Yeah, if that's indeed what the data, is suggesting, right? I think it's important to think and remind ourselves it's just one data point, right? But it does help in kind of raising things up. And so what we've seen when we've worked with teachers at the high school, for example, and this feels a little less tier 2 and tier 3, but more tier 1 for everyone, is we've worked with educators to think about, okay, well, so if these are the kids in your class, and these are some of the ways that they're answering these questions, how does that make you think about like what you're doing tomorrow, right? That kind of thing. And it doesn't necessarily come as a project or a program that we're implementing. It's more along the lines of helping educators think about the things they do on a daily basis that can help, lower the temperature, help kids kind of settle themselves if that's what they're saying. Or, think about, in the case that I was suggesting, the hard work. This is hard work and you can do it. Like, we have scaffolds to help you get there, So it's stuff like that that I think is really the meaningful work, in addition to when kids need the extra support, it's there.
And so Panorama is the application we're using, right, for all kids service. And we're 3 years into that application. And are we committed to it for, I guess this data gets really good, right, as you start following a kid through 3 schools. And,
right.
Are we committed to it for a while?
We are year to year, but as a school committee, we help set the budget.
But it's like in every 3 years we have a new program.
I can jump in because I get asked this a lot, and my answer is always yes. So I
just don't tell the vendor.
we're committed. We want to be able to have consistency in that data so we can work with it. There are other layers of it that are exciting. There's a whole other tool base within it of check-ins, that you can use with groups. There are other things we can do now that we're starting to have the data, and our teachers have gone through some excellent training and PD, with both Dave and Cheryl here. So it's to keep with it, but then we always evaluate, but then there's we always evaluate our tools, so it's not forever. In the sense that we assess and say, is this still delivering to us what we want it to? And then if it's not, and what do we need 3 years from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, then we'll look at that and say, okay, that's when we make that shift. But we're trying to have a commitment. This is a big part of our work in MTSS is to have all of the screeners that give us the information so we can understand, support, and engage our students. And that's what
It's up to the, it's up to the chair of the committee.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, is the goal for this to be in the teacher's hands to use, or is it strictly?
Oh, yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
It is in their hands. So,
This survey, well, it has been in the past. It's in administrator hands now. It's being released to teachers in the next 48 hours.
We learn a lot of different, they're not in this day in, day out, right? We hear different facets. This is also the same one where you pull in like attendance data, and you can pull in academic data and start to get dashboards of a child.
So for this particular one, what we can do is it does integrate with our SAS, which allows our PowerSchool Student Information System. I'm sorry to use a education jargon. So our it integrates with PowerSchool. So it helps us to look at our demographics and links kids up anonymously with data protection, so that we can look at, all right, yeah, everything's looking great here, but if we drill down to our subgroups, either socioeconomic, race, IEP, we can see if there are challenges within certain sectors. Cheryl has been working to explore different dashboards that would be able to integrate all of different types of data.
And Eric, you're right. Panorama is one of them. Like when they do these on track, statistics, they want us to incorporate the rest of those data into the system and kind of like, and maybe that's one of our options. We'll explore that as well. But there are options out there right now for bringing this data together. And so what we're planning on doing is bringing a group together that can really think about that and what we feel like we really need that will also be like fiscally responsible. So.
You mentioned the qualitative data. How is that gathered? Is that part of the
open response?
The original questions.
Yeah. So
in addition to the
empirical response, you have
you have 4 open response questions.
I see.
Okay, interesting.
Which I mean, it's a if you look at like if you did like a quantitative analysis of the typical response, if there is one, it's probably, average of 4 words, if that is. So, what it does is it gives you areas to probe for focus group and follow up for kind of bigger picture, but it allows you to drill a little bit deeper in terms of, what's particularly challenging or, a little bit of a thread to follow.
See, I imagine you could get a lot of meaningful information out of qualitative sources if the kids are responding in this quantitative way. So, just off the top of my head, we have a very positive, thing that we do within our classes. We have team projects and they get to work together. But we tend to throw everybody into the team before they even know what that dynamic is about. And somebody's got to be a leader, and it's just like, hey, sink or swim. It's kind of a sink or swim toss into the pool. And I've had at least my kids, my big sample size here, my kids have said, that's really frustrating to me, right? So if there's use that as an analogy, if there's a way to combine this into practical, everyday coaching that we can give the teachers on how to get some of these things implemented, I think that would help a lot.
Yeah, and I think what you're also getting at too is how do we do more of the dipstick check-ins at appropriate times. I think sometimes at the end of your 46 questions, you're done taking the survey. You don't want to type out anything more, like that's it. We need to find ways that are less intrusive to instruction to capture that data in real time, and both with the quick metrics, but also the open response to collect more of that perspective piece.
So how often is this administered throughout the year? Is it once, 3 times?
So this one's completed once annually. And so we're working towards more of the regular check-ins of what the best tool for that would be.
It's once annually, and K2 never participated at all, or did they?
So K2 filled it out around this time last year. That will be coming in the next couple of months. I think what they've learned from the first iteration of the K2 or the first two is that we're still getting to know our students. We need a little bit more time.
Because the teachers have to take it for the kids, basically.
And even the grade 3 is a little bit of a challenge. It's a lot of like teacher read aloud and the kids respond. So it takes, it's designed to be, a 15-minute survey. It takes them a good 30 plus minutes to complete it in class.
And that's in the fall, they do this, or generally?
Yeah, we had about 94% response rate for kids, with all the different absences and a lot of follow-up from teachers and administrators. So that was a really good response.
Do you have a sense beyond just the once a year administration of the survey, how often the tools in Panorama and Thrive are being used in things like advisory win? Is it sort of depends on your advisor? Is there a more standardized format? Are we working toward that?
So you just mentioned Wellness Wednesdays. You want to tell?
Yeah, so I think a couple different things. So with Thrively, there was a SEL curriculum that was piloted last year to get people into the portal. We are working to build out the tools that the teachers have access to, including the RIASEC, which explores interests, that well-being dipstick for the 8th grade that we're working to build out. On the parallel, and what's challenging, I think, to your point, Ms. Brown, that tools do some similar things. So the Thrively check-in is very similar to the Panorama check-in. So it's trying to figure out which one gives us the data that we need as quickly as we can collect it and is as user-friendly as possible. So that's an area, again, we're talking about goals and growth, is an area that we can grow as well. But right now we're focused on that kind of annual check-in for collection of data.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, on to school committee subcommittees. Policy subcommittee.
So we last week, we reviewed a slew of policies in section B, and we have some that we're bringing forward for a second reading, some that we were just going to do kind of waive the first reading and go straight to a second reading because they're very minor changes, and then we have one for a first reading. So these are all in your notes. So so we have, I'm just going to read the titles instead of the letters. So school committee member qualifications, oath of office. So you have the draft of that for second reading. So we brought that forward at a previous meeting for a first reading. You can see there's really just one minor change in red. And same with school committee powers and duties. So this was also, you can see below was our previous policy, and we've just kind of updated this to align with the current MASC suggested policy. And it's really just pretty minor. If you look at the 1 through 5, they're the same areas there in terms of legislative policy making, appraisal, provision of financial resources, public relations, educational planning, and evaluation. They just kind of moved around in order, and so the language is tweaked, but they're pretty minor. And then the 4 that we looked at for the first time last week, school committee member resignation, member code of ethics, organizational meeting, officers and officials. So a lot of these were just minor language tweaks to kind of make them gender neutral. And as you can see in BBBC, school committee member estimation, we're just changing he or she to they. So pretty minor stuff. So those are those four. And then the last one that we're bringing forward for a first reading, JKAA, the only one that's not a B, physical restraint of students. So this is just one, this is a policy where essentially we have already been following the current guidelines through DESE, but we noticed that the policy was not in alignment with that. So we're really just updating the policy to what is the current MASC recommended policy, and that it really is just reflecting what our current practice is, which is already in place. So that one, so you can look at that one, and that one really is just for a first read tonight, and then we'll come back to it at a future meeting. Any questions?
I just very briefly read all of them, but I didn't have access to them. So that was the first one. I had the first one, but not the rest. So
I can
just
fix that right now.
thank you. But I did read them. I was a good boy.
Good shot. Nice shot.
Good. We want you to read them before you put that on. That's a good thing.
All right, so it looks like we've got 5 policy changes that we can vote on tonight. Six.
Yes.
Yep.
So we have, and I can make a motion to approve all of them and read them all off. And then, but did you get a chance to read them all?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're pretty minor.
Yes. All right. So in that case, I would make a motion to approve the changes to policies BBBA, BBBB, that's one, BBA, BBBC, BCA, BDA, and BDB.
I'll second that. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're not unanimous.
All of you.
All of you. Great, thank you. All right, next is budget subcommittee. We'll have our note taker here again tonight. You want to do it, Sean, or want me to do it?
By all means.
All right, sounds good. So we met last week for the budget subcommittee. I think a couple highlights to call out is the impact of the governor's budget timeline. With the new governor voted in, the timeline gets pushed out, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks, which puts us into a tight window with town meetings, et cetera. So we've gone ahead and moved the date of the open budget meeting, and now looking, this basically, so the governor's budget got delayed from the last week of January to the first week in March. Our open budget meeting will now be the kind of third week of March before we go to the town meetings in May. So at this point, the goal will be to do the best we can with the estimations based on how we know things, and then to make final tweaks once the governor's budget comes through. Jay brought us through the current, budget updates on the school, similar to tonight. Things were kind of on track. From what we know so far in school choice, circuit breaker, grants, I think everything is essentially favorable to call it out. And so that'll help go a little bit going into next year. So if we call that a tailwind, the headwind becomes the next one, where we have a 14% increase to some of the private school out of district tuition. And so you get some good news and then some bad news that will offset that. Working along right now in the overall budget process. We'll have presentations in the future school committee meetings here as each of the schools kind of bring together their needs for the following year. Jay did update both of the towns, which was great, about the process change to how we cover the Norfolk Aggie. So rather than that flowing through the school budget, that will be passed on to the towns. The towns will need to take care of the funds just as they do BBT.
And of course, those funds wouldn't come to the school anymore, they would be handled.
They'd be handled, yep, by the towns directly, which, it's a variable that we don't know the budget about until late in the process, so, it'll be good, I think, if possible to.
Yeah, I think the budget or the enrollees aren't chosen until August, I believe.
Or they accept in August, that's
So
when we
it's
get
in
the
the,
final count.
it's in the middle of a budget year, so it's a very awkward way to manage it. But that's, we're transferring that responsibility to the towns.
Correct. There's I guess an RFP being put together right now, for the next transportation bid. We've got 2 years left on the contract, or 2 one-year extension options. But we're looking to see if we did a new contract, if there'd be some financial savings to that. Jay is also exploring some additional contract terms that have with field trips, et cetera. Let's see, we discussed tonight, the idea for a capital planning committee. We approved that committee to be formed. And we are meeting again next week on the 13th.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to join us for another budget committee. Maureen or Jay, did I miss any highlights?
I think so.
Okay.
Good. No, good, very good.
All right. Okay, I think we were just learning a little bit about people waiting at the last minute to get their homework done. We owe the school committee some goal updates, which I think we should put a deadline on, because that sounds fair. And I think having the ability to maybe submit those within 1 week and then review them when we're back together in 2 weeks would probably be an appropriate timeline. If that works for everybody?
That's why I didn't sign up for that.
All right, so I'll take a big piece of that. Are there any other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours? All right, and then I think we've got, any correspondence? No. All right, and then for future agenda items, we're gonna take a look at the substitute teacher pay scale, take a look at some more academic data through iReady, and then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll start going through the departmental budget presentations. Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, we are adjourned at 9:03.